The train lurched to a halt with a shriek of metal on metal, and Clara Whitmore felt her stomach drop along with it. Through the soot-streaked window, she could see the town, if you could even call it that. A scatter of wooden buildings huddled against an endless expanse of nothing. No trees, no softness, just hard-packed earth and a sky so big it made her feel like she might disappear into it. She pressed one hand against her ribs, feeling the stiff edge of the envelope tucked inside her bodice. Thomas Mercer's letters. 3 months of promises written in confident, slanting script. A good home. Comfort. Respectability. A fresh start far from the judgments of Boston society. Fresh start. That's what she needed, wasn't it? After her father's debts had swallowed their modest house, after her aunt had made it clear that charity had limits, after the whispers at church had grown too loud to ignore, poor thing, no prospects, no dowry, what will become of her? Thomas Mercer's advertisement in the Boston Herald had seemed like an answer. Prosperous rancher seeking respectable woman of good character for matrimony. Comfortable circumstances. Reply with references. She'd lied about the references. Not entirely. Mrs. Henderson from the boarding house had written something kind, and Reverend Walsh had signed his name without reading it too carefully. But she'd padded the truth, made her circumstances sound less desperate than they were. What choice did she have? Now, standing on the platform with her single trunk and carpet bag, breathing air that tasted like dust and distance, Clara wondered if Thomas Mercer had lied too. The platform was nearly empty. A few rough-looking men lounged against the station wall, watching her with the kind of curiosity that made her skin prickle. A woman in a faded calico dress hurried past, eyes down, one hand clamped on a little boy's shoulder. No one smiled. No one welcomed. Clara smoothed her skirt, gray wool, too heavy for this heat but the only decent thing she owned, and scanned the small crowd. Thomas had written that he'd meet her. Tall, he'd said. Dark hair. Well-dressed. She spotted him immediately. He stood apart from the others, and everything about him radiated confidence. Expensive coat despite the heat, polished boots, a watch chain glinting at his vest. His face was handsome in a cold, angular way, and when his eyes swept the platform, they moved past her twice before stopping. She saw the exact moment recognition hit. Saw something else hit right after. Disappointment, sharp and unmistakable. Clara's heart began to hammer. She lifted one hand in a small wave, forced a smile. He didn't return it. He walked toward her with slow, measured steps. Not eager, not welcoming, assessing. "Miss Whitmore?" His voice was clipped, Eastern-educated, carefully neutral. "Mr. Mercer." She held out her hand, and he took it briefly, as if touching something distasteful. "I'm so pleased to finally—" "You're younger than I expected." He released her hand, stepped back. His gaze traveled from her face to her trunk, lingering on the worn leather, the tarnished buckles. "And your letter mentioned family property in Connecticut." "There was property," Clara said carefully. "My father— Was it sold to pay debts?" Heat flooded her face. "I don't think that's—" "You misrepresented yourself, Miss Whitmore." His tone was pleasant, conversational, but his eyes were hard. "Your letters suggested a woman of means, refinement, not—" He gestured vaguely at her. "This." The platform seemed to tilt under her feet. "I came all this way. We had an agreement. An agreement based on information that appears to have been optimistic." He pulled out his pocket watch, checked it with theatrical precision. "I'm a businessman, Miss Whitmore. I invest carefully. I don't make purchases sight unseen without recourse if the goods fail to meet specifications." Goods. The word hit her like a slap. "I'm not goods," she said quietly. "No." He snapped the watch shut. "You're not. Which is why I'm exercising my right to refuse this arrangement. I'll pay for your return ticket to Boston. You can leave on tomorrow's train." "I don't want to go back to Boston." "That's not my concern." Something hot and desperate clawed up Clara's throat. "Please. I sold everything I had to get here. There's nothing for me back there. You promised—" "I promised a suitable woman a comfortable home. You're not suitable." He turned toward a waiting carriage. "The hotel will put your trunk in storage. Good day, Miss Whitmore." "Wait!" But he was already walking away, boot steps confident against the wooden planks. already dismissing her from his thoughts. Clara stood frozen, watching him climb into his carriage, watching him signal the driver, watching him leave without a backward glance. The men along the wall were still watching her. One of them grinned, showing gaps where teeth should be. Another said something low that made the others laugh. She picked up her carpet bag with shaking hands, left the trunk. What was the point? Everything she owned in the world, and it all fit in one battered case. She walked toward the town with her spine straight and her eyes forward, even though she could feel them staring, judging, making assumptions. The main street was a rutted dirt path lined with false front buildings that looked like stage sets for a show nobody wanted to watch. General store. Saloon. Blacksmith. No bank. No library. No graceful church spire like the one she'd known in Boston. She'd traded civilization for this. For nothing. The hotel was 2 stories of weathered clapboard with a sagging porch. A hand-painted sign read, "McAllister's Rooms" in flaking letters. Clara pushed through the door into a dim lobby that smelled of tobacco and old grease. The clerk was a thin man with suspicious eyes and ink-stained fingers. "Help you?" "I need a room. $2. In advance." She opened her reticule, counted out coins with fingers that wouldn't stay steady. All the money she had left in the world. Enough for 3 nights if she didn't eat. He took the money, pushed a register toward her. "Sign here. Room's upstairs, last door on the left. No men, no cooking, no laundry in the room." Of course. She signed Clara E. Whitmore in careful script, as if good penmanship could save her. The room was barely bigger than a closet. 1 narrow bed, 1 washstand, 1 window overlooking the alley. The wallpaper was peeling. Something scuttled in the corner when she opened the door. Clara set down her carpet bag and sat on the bed. The mattress sagged, ancient springs groaning. She looked at her hands, still wearing her mother's thin wedding band, the only piece of jewelry she hadn't sold, and tried to think. She had maybe $10 left. No job. No skills worth money in a place like this. She could cook and sew and read French and play the piano, none of which seemed particularly useful in a town that barely had sidewalks. She could take the return ticket Thomas had offered, go back to Boston and throw herself on Aunt Margaret's mercy. Endure the "I told you so" and the pitying looks and the slow suffocation of being someone's charity case for the rest of her life. Or she could. What? What could she possibly do? The question sat in her chest like a stone. She must have fallen asleep because when she opened her eyes, the light had changed. Late afternoon sun slanted through the dirty window. Her neck ached from the awkward angle. She'd been dreaming of her mother's kitchen, the smell of bread rising, the warmth of the stove, the feeling of being somewhere safe. She woke to none of those things. Her stomach growled, sharp and insistent. When had she last eaten? Breakfast. On the train. A roll she'd saved from the dining car. Hours ago. She counted her money again. If she spent anything on food, she'd have to leave the hotel sooner, but if she didn't eat, she'd be too weak to think, to plan, to do anything. Downstairs, she asked the suspicious clerk where she might find an affordable meal. May's Cafe, down the street, or the saloon if you don't mind the crowd. He looked her up and down. May's, probably. The cafe was a narrow building wedged between the general store and what looked like a boarding house. The windows were clouded with cooking grease. A handwritten menu hung crookedly by the door. Inside, a handful of tables were occupied by men in dusty work clothes, eating in silence. The air was thick with the smell of fried meat and burnt coffee. A woman, May, presumably, stood behind a counter, arms crossed over an ample chest, surveying her domain with the air of a general inspecting troops. She looked at Clara, and something shifted in her expression. Not kindness exactly, but recognition. "Sit anywhere, honey. Be with you in a minute." Clara chose a table in the corner, away from the men's eyes. When May came over, she was carrying a coffee pot and 2 cups. "You're the one came in on the afternoon train." It wasn't a question. "Mercer's mail-order bride." Clara flinched. Yes, I suppose." "Heard he turned you down flat." May poured coffee into both cups, sat down across from Clara without being invited. "That's rough." "It's none of your concern." "Honey, in a town this size, everything's everybody's concern. You might as well get used to it. She took a sip of coffee, watching Clara over the rim. You planning to head back east? I don't know. You got people back there? No. Money? Clara's throat tightened. Enough. May snorted. That's a lie, but I'll let it slide. You hungry? I can't afford. I'm asking if you're hungry, not if you can pay. Answer the question. Yes, Clara whispered. I'm very hungry. Thought so. You got that look. May stood, walked back to the kitchen. She returned a few minutes later with a plate piled high, fried chicken, potatoes, beans, a thick slice of bread. She set it in front of Clara. Eat. We'll figure out payment later. I can't accept charity. You can and you will. Eat, girl, before I change my mind. The food was simple, almost crude compared to what Clara had known in Boston, but she'd never tasted anything better. She forced herself to eat slowly, to maintain some dignity, even though she wanted to fall on the plate like a starving animal. May watched her, sipping coffee. How old are you? 23. Family? Dead, both parents. I have an aunt in Boston, but we don't. Clara set down her fork. Why are you helping me? Because I've been where you are. May's voice was flat, matter of fact. Came out here 15 years ago with a man who promised me the moon. He dropped dead of cholera 3 weeks after we arrived. Left me with nothing but debts and a reputation I hadn't earned. Had to claw my way up from the bottom. So when I see a woman get off that train with everything she owns in one bag and hope in her eyes, I know exactly what happens next. What happens next? Depends on the woman. Some go back east, some marry whoever will have them, no matter how bad the match. Some end up at Pearl's place on the edge of town, if you know what I mean. And some... She paused. Some figure out how to survive. Clara met her eyes. Which kind are you? May smiled, sharp and humorless. The kind that survives. Question is, which kind are you? I don't know yet. Fair enough. Finish your food. You're going to need your strength. Clara did. She cleaned the plate, drank 2 cups of bitter coffee, and felt her head clear for the first time since stepping off the train. May refused payment. You can work it off later if you're still here, and sent her back to the hotel with a warning to keep her door locked. Night fell hard in this country. No gas lamps, just scattered windows glowing in the dark. The saloon was loud with piano music and rough laughter. Clara hurried past, keeping to the shadows. In her cramped room, she lay awake listening to the sounds of the town settling. Boots on wooden stairs, a woman's high laugh, a dog barking in the distance, the wind rattling the loose window frame. She thought about Thomas Mercer's cold dismissal, the way he'd looked at her like she was something bought and returned defective merchandise, the casual cruelty of, "You're not suitable." She thought about May's question, "Which kind are you?" She didn't know. She'd never had to be strong before. Her whole life had been about being acceptable, appropriate, the kind of daughter who smiled prettily and caused no trouble. Look where that had gotten her. Sleep came eventually, restless and thin. She woke to bright sunlight and someone pounding on her door. "Miss Whitmore, you in there?" Clara stumbled out of bed, pulled a shawl over her nightgown. "Who is it?" "Sheriff Garrett, need to talk to you." Her stomach dropped. What had she done? What could she possibly have done? She opened the door a crack. The man in the hallway was middle-aged, weathered, with a star pinned to his vest and tired eyes that had seen too much. "Morning, miss. Sorry to bother you early. Got a few questions about Thomas Mercer. I barely know him. He met me at the station yesterday and rejected you. I heard. That's not what this is about." He shifted his weight, looking uncomfortable. "When did you last see him?" "Yesterday afternoon, at the station. He left in his carriage." "Why?" "Because his ranch hand found him dead this morning, shot twice in the chest. Happened sometime last night." The hallway tilted. Clara gripped the doorframe. "Dead?" "Yes, ma'am, and seeing as you're the newest person in town and you had a public argument with him yesterday, I need to ask, where were you last night?" "Here. I was here." I had dinner at May's cafe and then came back here. I never left. Her voice was rising, panic threading through it. I wouldn't. Anybody see you? The clerk downstairs. I passed him on my way up. That must have been around 7 o'clock. I didn't leave after that. Mercer was killed around midnight. You got any proof you were in this room? How would I have proof? I was sleeping. The sheriff sighed. Look, Miss Whitmore, I'm not saying you did it, but you got to understand how this looks. Woman comes to town, gets rejected, man ends up dead 12 hours later. There must be dozens of people who had reason to. He was a businessman, wasn't he? Maybe someone owed him money. Or maybe I'm checking all possibilities. You just stay in town for now, understand? Don't go anywhere. He left her shaking in the doorway. The news spread through town like wildfire. By mid-morning, everyone knew. Thomas Mercer, shot dead in his own home. The new woman, the mail-order bride he'd rejected, under suspicion. Clara felt the eyes on her when she walked to May's for breakfast. Heard the whispers fall silent when she entered. Saw the way people looked at her, wary, hostile, excited by the scandal. May served her coffee without comment, then leaned close. You didn't do it. It wasn't a question, but Clara answered anyway. No. Didn't think so. You don't have the look of someone who could shoot a man. What does that look like? Hard. You're desperate, honey, but you're not hard. Not yet. May refilled her cup. You should probably leave town, though. Take that return ticket and go. The sheriff told me to stay. He tell you you're a suspect? Not in so many words, but yes. Then you're stuck. May straightened, wiping her hands on her apron. Nothing to do but wait it out. They'll find who really did it eventually. Probably. Probably. Not exactly reassuring. Clara spent the day in her room avoiding stares, trying to think. Her money was dwindling fast. Another night at the hotel would leave her with almost nothing. She needed work, needed income, but who would hire a woman suspected of murder? That evening, May appeared at her door with a plate of food and a proposition. I need help in the cafe, she said bluntly. My girl ran off with a cowboy last week, and I've been doing everything myself. You know how to cook? Some. Basic things. Can you wash dishes without breaking them? Yes. Can you smile at customers even when they're rude? Clara thought of all the Boston society ladies she'd served tea to, all the condescension she'd swallowed with a polite nod. Yes. Then you're hired. 6 days a week, breakfast and dinner shifts. I'll pay you $3 a week plus meals. You can sleep in the back room. It's not much, but it's better than paying for a hotel. $3 a week. Nothing. Barely enough to survive. But it was something. Why are you doing this, Clara? Clara asked. Because you need it, and because I need the help. Don't make it more complicated than it is. May set down the plate. You start tomorrow, 5 in the morning. After she left, Clara sat on the bed with the warm plate in her lap and felt something unexpected. Hope. Small, fragile, but there. She ate slowly, tasting every bite. Tomorrow she'd start working. It wasn't the life she'd imagined, not even close, but it was a life. She'd earn it herself, owe it to no one. Which kind are you? Maybe the kind that survives. The next morning, Clara woke before dawn in the small room behind May's kitchen. It was barely bigger than a pantry, a cot, a trunk, a basin. But it was hers, paid for with work instead of charity. May put her to work immediately, washing dishes, peeling potatoes, serving coffee to men who either stared too long or wouldn't meet her eyes. The murder was all anyone talked about. Speculation ran wild. Some thought it was a robbery gone wrong. Others suspected a business rival. A few still looked at Clara with open suspicion. She kept her head down and worked. Days blurred together. Up before dawn, work until the last customer left, collapse into bed. Her hands grew rough from washing dishes in harsh soap. Her back ached from standing all day. But she was eating regularly, sleeping under a roof, existing. A week passed, then 2. The sheriff arrested a drifter who'd been seen arguing with Mercer over a land deal. The town's attention shifted. Clara stopped being the murder suspect and became just another working woman beneath notice. May taught her to make biscuits, to fry eggs without breaking the yolks, to brew coffee strong enough to wake the dead. The work was hard and monotonous, but there was a rhythm to it that Clara found almost soothing. One afternoon, a man came in who made the usual customers look soft. He was tall, broad-shouldered, weathered by sun and wind. His clothes were clean but worn, his hands scarred from hard work. He moved carefully, like someone who'd learned the cost of careless motion. He sat at the counter, and May greeted him with genuine warmth. "Caleb, haven't seen you in a month. Been busy." His voice was low, quiet. "The usual, May." Coming right up. Clara brought him coffee, and he looked up at her with eyes the color of creek water, gray-green, watchful. "You're new. Clara Whitmore." She set down the cup. "I started 2 weeks ago." "Caleb Rourke." He nodded once, then went back to his coffee. May brought him a plate of beef and potatoes, lingered to chat. Clara learned that he owned a ranch about 10 miles out, ran it alone except for seasonal help. He was quiet, reserved, came to town only when necessary. He ate in silence, paid, and left. "That's Caleb," May said, watching him go. "Good man. Keeps to himself, but solid. Lost his wife and daughter to fever about 5 years back. Hasn't been the same since." Clara thought about the careful way he moved, the watchfulness in his eyes. Grief, she recognized. She'd worn it herself after her parents died. Life continued its new rhythm. Clara worked, saved her meager wages, and slowly began to feel less like she was drowning. She was surviving. It wasn't much, but it was hers. Then one evening, 3 weeks after she'd started at May's, a man stumbled into the cafe just before closing. He was bleeding from a gash on his head, eyes wild. "Fire!" he gasped. "Prairie fire! Coming from the east, moving fast." The cafe emptied in seconds. Clara followed May outside and saw it, an orange glow on the horizon, growing brighter. Smoke thickened the air. "How far?" someone shouted. 10 miles, maybe less. Wind's pushing it this way." 10 miles. That's where Caleb's ranch was. May grabbed Clara's arm. "We need to help evacuate. Get water barrels ready in case it reaches town. Move." The next hours were chaos. The whole town mobilized, hauling water, clearing brush, preparing for the worst. Some men rode out to warn the outlying ranches. Clara worked alongside everyone else, hauling buckets until her arms screamed, wetting down buildings, trying not to think about the wall of fire advancing through the darkness. Near midnight, riders started coming back. Most of the ranchers had evacuated, livestock driven to safety. A few stubborn ones had stayed to fight. "What about Caleb Rourke?" May asked one of the riders. "Refused to leave. Says he'll defend his land or die trying." May swore viciously. "Damn fool, someone needs to—" "I'll go," Clara heard herself say. Everyone turned to stare at her. "You can't even ride," May said. "Then someone teach me. Quickly." A young cowboy named Jake laughed, surprised. "She's got sand. I'll give her that. Come on, I'll get you a horse." The horse was old and steady, thank God. Jake showed her the basics, how to hold the reins, how to stay balanced, how to make the animal go. It wasn't graceful, but it was functional. "Follow the north road," he said. "You'll see the fire, hard to miss. But if it looks like you can't make it, turn back. Understand?" She understood. She went anyway. The ride was terrifying. The horse sensed her fear, tossed its head nervously. The smoke grew thicker, the orange glow brighter. Heat pressed against her face, even from miles away. She found Caleb's ranch by the fence line, wooden posts stretching into darkness. The house was a dark shape against the fire's glow. She could see movement, someone hauling water, digging trenches. "Caleb!" she shouted, sliding off the horse clumsily. He turned, shock clear even through the smoke and darkness. "What the hell are you doing here?" "Helping." She grabbed a shovel. "Tell me what to do." "You need to leave, now. This fire—" "I'm not leaving, so either put me to work or waste time arguing." For a second, he just stared at her. Then something shifted in his face. Respect, maybe, or resignation. "Dig a fire break, 3 feet wide, all along the eastern fence." "Go!" They worked in desperate silence, the fire a living thing roaring closer. The heat became unbearable. Sparks landed on Clara's skirt, and she beat them out with dirt-covered hands. Her lungs burned from smoke. Her muscles screamed. But she didn't stop. Neither did Caleb. The fire hit like a storm. One moment it was approaching, the next it was upon them, a wall of flame consuming the grassland, racing toward the ranch. The firebreak slowed it, but not enough. "The house, Chris!" Caleb shouted. "We need to wet it down." They hauled water from the well, throwing bucket after bucket onto the wooden walls, the roof, anywhere flame might catch. The heat was monstrous. Clara's vision blurred from smoke. She could barely breathe. Then she heard it, a crack, a groan. Part of the barn catching fire. "Leave it!" Caleb grabbed her arm. "It's lost. We saved the house." But the wind shifted. A burning beam flew through the air, landed on the porch. Fire spread across the dry wood like water. "Inside!" Caleb pushed her toward the door. "Get anything important. We're abandoning—" The roof groaned. Clara looked up and saw flames spreading across the shingles. "Get out!" Caleb yelled. "Now!" But she saw it, a chest in the corner, photographs scattered near it. His life, his memories, his lost family. She lunged for it. "Clara, no!" She grabbed the chest, turned to run. That's when the beam fell. It caught her across the shoulders, drove her to the floor. Pain exploded white and blinding. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Smoke filled her lungs, heat pressed down like a physical weight. Through the haze, she saw Caleb, saw him make a choice. He could leave, save himself. He didn't. He charged back into the burning house, lifted the beam with a roar of effort, pulled her free. His hands were burned. His face was black with soot. But he didn't stop, didn't hesitate. He carried her out into the night, away from the collapsing house, into the relative safety of the plowed field. Set her down gently. "Why?" he rasped. "Why did you go back for that?" She coughed, lungs full of smoke. "Your family, the photographs." He stared at her. In his soot-covered face, his eyes were impossibly bright. Behind them, the house collapsed with a thunderous crash. Flames shot skyward. Everything he owned, everything he'd built, gone. Caleb didn't look at it. He looked at her. "You could have died," he said quietly. "So could you. I've got nothing left to lose." Clara met his eyes. "Neither do I." The fire burned itself out near dawn. The ranch was destroyed. House, barn, most of the outbuildings. But the land remained. The well remained. And they remained. They sat in the ash-covered dirt as the sun rose. Two people who'd survived something impossible. Clara's shoulders ached where the beam had hit her. Her lungs felt scraped raw. But she was alive. Caleb was alive. "Thank you," he said finally. "For what?" "I nearly got us both killed. For caring enough to try." He looked at the ruins of his home. "Most people wouldn't have. Most people are smarter than me." He almost smiled. Almost. They rode back to town together, Clara clinging to the saddle desperately, Caleb leading her horse. May met them with relief and fury in equal measure. "You damn fool, girl! I thought you were dead." "Not yet," Clara managed. May fed them, fussed over their burns, made them drink water until they were ready to burst. Other townspeople came by with clothes, blankets, offers of help. Caleb accepted it all with quiet gratitude, but Clara could see the weight settling on him. He'd lost everything. Again. That evening, as he prepared to ride out to survey the damage in daylight, Clara stopped him. "What will you do?" "Rebuild, same as last time." His voice was flat, exhausted. "What else is there?" "You can't do it alone. Don't have much choice." "You do, actually." The words came out before she could think them through. "You could hire help." "Can't afford help." "Then accept it as charity, or partnership, or—" She took a breath. "Or let someone stay who wants to help because they choose to, not because they're paid." He looked at her for a long moment. "Why would you do that?" "Because I have nowhere else to go. Because you saved my life. Because—" She hesitated, then pushed forward. "Because I'm tired of being helpless. I want to build something, even if it's not mine, even if it's just helping you rebuild what was lost. Clara, I'm not asking for charity. I'll work. I'll earn my place. Just give me a chance. The silence stretched. Then Caleb nodded once, sharp and decisive. All right, we start tomorrow. And that, Clara thought as she watched him ride into the smoke-hazy dawn, was how you survived. Not by accepting what you were offered, not by being what others expected, by choosing, by fighting, by refusing to disappear. She'd come to this town as someone's rejected goods. She'd been suspected of murder, pitied, dismissed. Now she was going to build something from ash and stubbornness. It wasn't the future she'd imagined on that train. It was better. It was hers. The first morning at the ranch, Clara woke to darkness so complete she thought she'd gone blind. No street sounds, no voices from adjacent rooms, just silence thick enough to touch, and air that smelled like burned wood and ash. She sat up on the narrow cot Caleb had set up in what remained of the bunkhouse, one of the few structures the fire had only partially destroyed. Her shoulders screamed where the beam had struck her. Every breath felt like inhaling ground glass. Worth it, she told herself. Better than that hotel room. Better than going back. Outside, she could hear someone moving. The scrape of a shovel against dirt. Caleb, already working. She forced herself up, splashed cold water on her face from the basin, and stepped into the pre-dawn gray. The devastation looked worse in daylight. What had been a working ranch was now a graveyard of charred timber and twisted metal. The main house was nothing but a blackened skeleton. The barn had collapsed entirely. Fences lay in scorched pieces. Caleb was digging through the rubble of what might have been a storage shed, his movements methodical and joyless. He didn't look up when she approached. "What can I do?" she asked. "You should rest. Those burns will hurt whether I'm resting or working. Tell me what needs doing." He straightened, wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of soot. "We need to salvage anything usable. Tools, hardware, anything metal that survived. Sorted into piles. Then we start clearing the foundation of the house." "All right. Clara." He met her eyes. "This is going to be brutal work. If you change your mind, I won't." Something flickered in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. "Then you'll need gloves. Check that trunk by the bunkhouse door. Should be a pair that fit." The gloves were too large, stiff with disuse, but they'd keep her hands from shredding. She started where he pointed, pulling aside burned boards to find the salvageable beneath. A hammer with a charred handle but intact head. A set of hinges. A tin bucket with the bottom melted through but the sides still good. The sun climbed, and with it came heat that made the burn scars on the ground shimmer. Sweat soaked through Clara's dress within an hour. Her muscles, soft from weeks of cafe work, screamed protest. But she didn't stop. Neither did Caleb. They worked in silence until mid-morning, when he finally called a break. He had a canteen of water, which they shared. It was warm and tasted like metal, but Clara had never been so grateful for anything. "You meant what you said," Caleb said. Not a question. "About what?" "Earning your place." "I don't say things I don't mean." He took another drink, considering her. "Why here? May would have kept you on at the cafe. Safer work, easier." "Safe and easy haven't done much for me so far." Clara looked at the ruined ranch, the impossible task ahead. "Besides, I'm tired of serving other people's dreams. I want to build something." "This isn't your dream." "No, but maybe it could be part of one." He handed her the canteen, stood. "Back to work then." They fell into a rhythm over the following days. Up before dawn, work until dark, collapse into exhausted sleep. Clara learned to sort debris, to recognize what could be saved and what had to be hauled away. Her hands blistered despite the gloves, then calloused. Her back adapted to the constant bending and lifting. Caleb was a man of few words, but she learned to read him anyway. The set of his shoulders when he was pushing through pain. The way his jaw tightened when he uncovered something that had belonged to his wife. A scorched teacup, a child's toy melted beyond recognition. He never spoke about them, but grief hung around him like smoke. On the fourth day, a wagon rolled up the dirt path. May sat in the driver's seat, reins held competently in her weathered hands. The bed was loaded with supplies. Lumber, nails, canvas, food. Thought you might need this? She called out. Caleb walked over, frowning. May, I can't pay. Did I ask you to pay? Town took up a collection. Everyone who's got anything to spare threw it in. Consider it a loan if it makes you feel better, but personally I'd call it neighbors helping neighbors. Basin. She climbed down, surveyed the destruction. Lord, Caleb, I knew it was bad, but this, we're managing. I can see that. May's eyes found Clara standing back with her soot-covered dress and rope-burned hands. You look like hell, girl. Thank you. Wasn't a compliment. You eating? When there's time. Make time. You're no good to anyone if you collapse. May hauled a crate from the wagon. Got eggs, bread, dried meat, real food. And before you start with your pride, Caleb Rourke, I don't want to hear it. Clara worked for me long enough to earn a care package. They unloaded the wagon together. Along with food, May had brought practical things. Soap, bandages, a tin of salve for burns. And tools. A new saw, a box of nails, a measuring tape. Jake sends his regards, May said as they worked. He's the one who donated the saw. Said to tell you he remembers when you helped him rebuild after that storm 2 years back. Caleb's face softened slightly. Tell him thanks. Tell him yourself when you come to town. Which you will, because I'm not hauling supplies out here every week. May paused. How long until you've got a roof over your head? Month, maybe, if weather holds and nothing else goes wrong. Then you stay in the bunkhouse until then? It's got 3 walls and most of a roof. That's more than some folks have. May looked at Clara. And you're all right with this arrangement? It was my idea. Your idea to live in a half-burned shack in the middle of nowhere with a man you barely know? Yes. May shook her head. You're either brave or crazy. Haven't decided which. But there was approval in her voice. After May left, Clara and Caleb stood among the supplies like survivors who'd stumbled upon treasure. People are good, Caleb said quietly. Forget that sometimes. Easy to forget when you're alone. He glanced at her. I suppose it is. That night, they ate real food for the first time in days. Bread and eggs and dried beef that May had packed. Caleb built a fire in the clearing where the house had stood, and they sat on salvaged boards, plates balanced on their knees. Tell me about Boston, Caleb said abruptly. Clara looked up, surprised. Why? Because I've been working next to you for days and I don't know anything except you're stubborn and you don't quit. Seems like I should know more. Fair enough. She chewed slowly, organizing thoughts. It's crowded, loud, buildings so close together you can hear your neighbors breathe. Streets that smell like horses and coal smoke. Churches on every corner. Society ladies with more opinions than sense. Sounds terrible. Parts of it were, but parts were beautiful. The common in spring, the harbor at sunrise, libraries full of books you could lose yourself in. She paused. I didn't fit there, though. My father was a clerk, respectable enough but not wealthy. When he died, I learned fast how little respect matters without money. That's why you came west. That's why I ran away. Coming west makes it sound intentional, like I had a plan. She stabbed at her eggs. Thomas Mercer was supposed to be the plan. That worked out well. His loss. She laughed, short and bitter. That's generous. Not generous, true. Man who judges someone by their luggage isn't worth much. Caleb set down his plate. For what it's worth, I'm glad he was a fool. If he hadn't been, you wouldn't be here. Something warm unfurled in Clara's chest. Is that your way of saying you're glad I stayed? It's my way of saying I appreciate the help. Careful, Caleb. That almost sounded like a compliment. Don't let it go to your head. But he was almost smiling when he said it. The work continued. Brutal, endless, but purposeful. They cleared the house foundation stone by stone. Caleb showed her how to identify which pieces of timber could be reused, how to pull nails without bending them, how to stack lumber so it wouldn't warp. She learned other things too. That Caleb rose an hour before dawn and worked until he couldn't see straight. That he was careful with tools, maintaining them obsessively. That he never wasted anything, not food or water or materials. That he spoke to the surviving horse, an old mare named Bess who'd been in the far pasture during the fire, with more gentleness than he showed most people. And she learned that he still grieved. She saw it in the way he paused sometimes, staring at nothing, the way he carefully set aside anything that had belonged to his wife or daughter, the way he worked himself to exhaustion, as if staying busy could outrun memory. 2 weeks into the rebuilding, a stranger rode up. He was well-dressed, smooth-faced, with the look of someone who'd never done real work. A lawyer, Clara guessed before he even opened his mouth. "Mr. Rourke, I'm Edmund Price, representing the Consolidated Land Company. I'm here to discuss a business proposition." Caleb straightened from the post he'd been setting. "Not interested." "You haven't heard the offer yet." "Don't need to. My land's not for sale." Price smiled condescending. "Mr. Rourke, be reasonable. Your ranch has been destroyed. Rebuilding will cost more than you can afford. The company is prepared to make a generous offer." "How generous?" $1,500 for the property and all water rights." Caleb's laugh was harsh. "That's barely half what it's worth, and you know it. It's worth what someone will pay, and right now, you're not exactly in a strong negotiating position." Price glanced at the devastation. "Face facts. You're one bad season away from losing everything anyway. This way you walk away with cash. This way I walk away with nothing. This land is my life. Your life appears to be in ruins." Clara saw Caleb's hands clench, saw the muscle jump in his jaw. She stepped forward before he could do something they'd both regret. "Mr. Price," she said pleasantly, "I think Mr. Rourke has made his position clear." Price looked at her like she was a horse that had suddenly spoken. "And you are?" "Someone who's telling you to leave before you're thrown off this property." "You have no authority. Neither do you. This land belongs to Caleb Rourke, and he's told you no. That's the end of the conversation." Price's smile went cold. "The company doesn't take no for an answer, miss. Whitmore. And I don't care what the company takes or doesn't take. Leave. Now." For a moment, she thought he might argue. Then he glanced at Caleb, who looked ready to commit violence, and apparently decided discretion was the better part of greed. "This isn't over," Price said, mounting his horse. "The company will make other offers. Eventually, you'll accept." "Don't hold your breath," Caleb said. They watched him ride away. When the dust settled, Caleb turned to Clara. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. If I'd let you handle it, you'd have punched him." "Probably." "Definitely. And then we'd have the sheriff out here, and you don't need that trouble." She picked up the post they'd been working on. "Who's the Consolidated Land Company?" "Eastern investors buying up land out here. Been pressuring ranchers for months. Most have sold." His voice was grim. "They want the water rights. Control the water, control the territory." "They'll come back." "I know." "What will you do?" "Same thing I'm doing now. Rebuild. Hold on. Not let bastards in fancy suits steal what's mine." He grabbed the post. "Come on. We've got work to do." But Clara noticed he glanced down the road several times that afternoon, watching for trouble. That night, as they ate dinner by firelight, Clara asked the question that had been bothering her. "Why this land? If it's so hard, if you've lost so much here, why not start over somewhere else?" Caleb was quiet for a long time. "My wife is buried here. My daughter. Can't leave them." "They're not here, Caleb. They're gone." "I know that." His voice was rough. "But this is where we were happy. Where I built something with my own hands. Where Sarah planted a garden and Emma learned to walk. Leaving would be like saying none of that mattered. It mattered. It will always matter. But staying here because you're afraid to let go, I'm not afraid." "Aren't you?" He stood abruptly. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Maybe not, but I know what it's like to hold on to something because letting go feels like dying. I held on to Boston, onto the idea of who I was supposed to be, until it nearly destroyed me." She stood too, facing him across the fire. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose to live instead of just surviving. And you think you're living now? Sleeping in a burned-out bunkhouse, breaking your back for a ranch that isn't yours? Yes, because I chose it. Not because someone told me I should, not because I had no other options. I chose this. That makes all the difference. He stared at her, firelight casting shadows across his face. You're a strange woman, Clara Whitmore. I'll take that as a compliment. It was one. The next day brought rain. Not a gentle drizzle, but a biblical downpour that turned the ash to black mud and made working impossible. They huddled in the bunkhouse, watching water pour through the gaps in the roof, listening to thunder crack like the world splitting open. Tell me about your wife, Clara said into the drumming silence. Caleb looked at her sharply. Why? Because you never talk about her, and that seems like it must be exhausting. Some things are private. Some things fester when you keep them locked inside. He was quiet so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, her name was Sarah. She was a teacher from Denver, smart, stubborn, laughed at my jokes even when they weren't funny. His voice softened. She saw this land when it was nothing but grass and rocks, and she saw what it could be, believed in it, in me. How did you meet? I was working construction in Denver. She came to ask if we could build desks for her school. Took me 3 weeks to finish a job that should have taken one because I kept finding excuses to talk to her. A ghost of a smile. She knew what I was doing, called me on it, asked if I was going to actually court her or just waste her time with furniture projects. Clara smiled. I like her already. Everyone did? She had this way of making people feel seen, valued. He looked down at his hands. Emma was like that too. Only 6 years old, but she'd talk to anyone, asked 1,000 questions about everything. Wanted to know how things worked, why the sky was blue, where the stars went during the day. What happened to them? Fever. Came through one summer, fast and vicious. Emma caught it first. Sarah caught it taking care of her. I rode for the doctor, but by the time we got back, he stopped, throat working. They died 2 days apart. Sarah held Emma until the end, singing to her. She died still singing. The rain hammered against the roof. Clara didn't know what to say. There were no words adequate for that kind of loss. I'm sorry, she said finally. Everyone's sorry. Doesn't change anything. No, but it matters to say it anyway. He looked at her, something raw in his expression. You remind me of her sometimes, not in looks, but the way you won't back down, the way you see what needs doing and you just do it. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? I haven't decided yet. They sat in silence, listening to the storm. After a while, Caleb spoke again. The land company. Price wasn't lying about them not taking no for an answer. They've driven off 6 ranchers already. How? Legal pressure, cutting off access to markets. Sometimes worse. Jim Henderson refused to sell last year. His barn mysteriously burned down a week later. After the 3rd accident, he sold. Clara felt cold that had nothing to do with the rain. You think they'll come after you? I think they'll try. Question is whether I can hold out long enough to make them give up. He met her eyes, which is why I need to say this now. If things get dangerous, if the company starts pushing hard, you should leave. Go back to Mays. Get clear of this. No. Clara, we've had this conversation. I chose to be here. I'm not leaving because someone wants to bully you off your land. It's not your fight. Yes, it is. You took me in when no one else would. You gave me a chance to build something. That makes it my fight too. She leaned forward. Besides, you need me. Need you? Who else is going to keep you from punching lawyers? That surprised a laugh out of him, genuine, startled. It transformed his face, made him look years younger. All right, he said. You can stay, but if things get bad, then we'll deal with it together. The rain stopped near evening. They emerged to find the world washed clean, the sky scrubbed to impossible blue. Steam rose from the black ground. Everything smelled like wet earth and new beginnings. They worked until dark, making up for lost time. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold, Clara paused to catch her breath. Her muscles ached. Her hands were raw. She was filthy and exhausted. She'd never felt more alive. Caleb looked over at her. "You're smiling." "Am I?" "Like a crazy person." "Maybe I am crazy. Sane people probably don't volunteer to rebuild a ranch from scratch." "Definitely crazy then." But he was smiling too. "Come on, let's eat. You've earned it." Over the following weeks, the ranch slowly took shape. With May's supplies and help from a few neighbors who owed Caleb favors, they raised the frame for a new house. It was smaller than the original, simpler but solid. Clara learned to measure twice and cut once, to check if boards were level, to drive nails without bending them. She learned other things too. That Caleb sang quietly while he worked, old songs in a low voice, that he was good with animals, patient where he was gruff with people, that he checked on her when he thought she wasn't looking, making sure she wasn't pushing too hard. And she learned that she was stronger than she'd ever imagined. Her arms developed muscle. Her hands grew tough as leather. She could work a full day without collapsing, could lift boards that would have been impossible months ago. One evening, as they sat eating dinner, Caleb said, "You've changed." "How?" "When you first got here, you looked like you might break. Now you look like you could drive nails with your bare hands." Clara flexed her calloused fingers. "Feels that way sometimes." "It suits you." She glanced at him. Compliments from Caleb were rare enough to be treasured. "Thank you." "It's the truth." He set down his plate. "I've been thinking about what happens when the house is finished." Her heart sank. This was it. The conversation where he thanked her for her help and suggested it was time she moved on. She braced herself. "What about it?" "You'll need your own space. Can't keep sleeping in the bunkhouse. I was thinking we could partition off part of the new house. Give you a proper room." Clara stared at him. "You want me to stay? Long term?" "If you want. You've earned a place here. More than earned it." He looked uncomfortable, like the words were being pulled from him. "Truth is, I don't want to do this alone anymore. It's better with you here." Something warm bloomed in her chest. "I'd like that." "Good. That's, good." He stood abruptly. "I'll draw up plans tomorrow, figure out the best layout." He walked away quickly, as if embarrassed by his own honesty. Clara sat in the gathering dark, smiling. She'd come to this territory with nothing. Been rejected, suspected, pitied. She'd slept in a closet-sized room and served coffee to men who looked through her. Now she had a place, a purpose, a future she was building with her own hands, and maybe, just maybe, something else. Something she didn't have words for yet. Something in the way Caleb looked at her sometimes, in the comfortable silence they'd developed, in the way they moved around each other like partners in a familiar dance. It was too soon to name it, too fragile to examine too closely. But it was there, growing slowly like everything worth having. The house took another 3 weeks to finish. They worked dawn to dusk, and slowly the structure rose. Walls. A roof that didn't leak. Windows that actually closed. A door that hung straight. The day they moved in, Clara stood in her new room, small but hers, with a real bed and a window facing east to catch the sunrise, and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Home. It wasn't perfect. The walls were rough. The floor was uneven. But she'd helped build every board, driven half the nails, chosen where the windows should go. This was hers in a way nothing else had ever been. That night, they sat on the new porch, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. The prairie stretched endlessly in all directions, wild and harsh and beautiful. "Thank you," Clara said quietly. "For what?" "For giving me a chance when you had no reason to." Caleb was quiet for a moment. "You gave me something too." "What's that?" "A reason to rebuild. Before you showed up, I was just going through motions. Rebuilding because I didn't know what else to do. But you reminded me what it could be for, not just survival, building something that matters." "Does it matter?" "Yeah." He looked at her, his eyes serious in the starlight. "It does." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who'd found something unexpected in the ruins. The night was cool, the stars impossibly bright, and for the first time in longer than Clara could remember, the future didn't look like something to endure. It looked like something to build. The first real test came 3 weeks after they'd moved into the new house. Clara was kneading bread dough at the kitchen table when she heard horses approaching, not the casual pace of a neighbor dropping by. Fast, deliberate. She wiped flour from her hands and stepped to the window, 4 riders moving in formation. The lead man was Edmund Price, the lawyer from Consolidated Land Company. The others looked like hired muscle, hard faces, guns visible at their hips. "Caleb," she called toward the barn where he was mending harness. "We've got company." He emerged, took one look at the riders, and his jaw set. "Stay inside." "Not a chance." "Clara, we settled this already." She grabbed the rifle from above the door Caleb had taught her to shoot last week, rough lessons that left her shoulder bruised but competent, and followed him into the yard. Price reined in his horse, smiling like they were old friends. "Mr. Rourke, Miss Whitmore. Beautiful day, isn't it?" "State your business," Caleb said flatly. "Direct as always. I admire that." Price swung down from his saddle, brushing dust from his coat. "I'm here with a revised offer from the company. $2,000 for the property. That's a fair price, you'll agree. Still not selling. You should reconsider. My associates here," he gestured at the 3 men, still mounted, "are preparing to survey adjacent properties. Sometimes survey work gets messy, markers get moved, fence lines become disputed, water access gets complicated." Clara felt ice slide down her spine. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. Caleb's hand moved toward the rifle leaning against the porch post. "You're telling me the company plans to steal my land through legal trickery. I'm telling you that boundary disputes are expensive to resolve. Court cases take years. During that time, a man can't sell cattle, can't get credit, can't operate. Most ranchers find it easier to accept a fair offer and move on." "Get off my property." Price's smile didn't waver. "You're making a mistake." "Won't be my first, won't be my last." Caleb picked up the rifle, didn't point it, but held it ready. "You've got 10 seconds. One of Price's men shifted in his saddle, hand drifting toward his gun. Clara raised her own rifle, not quite aiming, but close enough to make the point. "The lady knows how to handle that?" the man asked, amused. "Well enough to make you regret testing her," Clara said. Her voice was steadier than her hands. Price held up a hand, stopping his man from doing something stupid. "Violence won't help your situation, Mr. Rourke." "Neither will you being here. Time's up. Leave." For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Price mounted his horse with exaggerated care. "The company doesn't forget slights, Mr. Rourke. We'll be watching. I'll sleep better knowing that." They rode off, taking their time, making it clear they weren't intimidated. Clara watched until they were out of sight, then lowered the rifle. Her hands were shaking. "That was stupid," Caleb said. "Which part?" "Following me out here, pointing a gun at armed men. Pick one." "You were outnumbered 4-1. What was I supposed to do?" "Stay safe." "Safe isn't an option anymore. You heard him. They're coming after you whether I'm involved or not." She met his eyes. "I meant what I said. We deal with this together." He looked at her for a long moment, something complicated working across his face. "You're going to get yourself killed." "Probably, but I'll be in good company." He almost smiled. Almost. "Come on. That bread dough is probably ready to be shaped." They didn't talk about the visit while they worked, but Clara could feel the tension radiating off Caleb. He checked the property lines that evening, rode the fence perimeter looking for markers that might have been moved. He came back after dark, face grim. "They've started," he said. "Northern boundary stakes have been pulled, replaced with new ones 50 yards south of where they should be." "Can you prove they did it?" "Proving and knowing are different things." He sat heavily at the table. Price was right about one thing. Court battles cost money I don't have, time I don't have. Then we don't let it get to court. We reset the stakes, document everything, get witnesses. Who's going to witness against the land company? They've got half the town on their payroll one way or another, Clara thought. May, she doesn't scare easy. And Jake, he owes you, plus some of the other ranchers who haven't sold yet. They'd benefit from standing together. Most of them want to keep their heads down. Then we convince them otherwise. The company is picking you off one by one because you're isolated. But if you organize, present a united front, you think a few struggling ranchers can stand up to Eastern money? I think you don't have much choice. Either fight or surrender. She leaned forward. And you don't strike me as the surrendering type. He looked at her, and something fierce flickered in his eyes. No, I'm not. The next day they rode to town. Clara hadn't been back since she'd left May's to help rebuild the ranch. The place looked the same, dusty, rough, impermanent, but she felt different moving through it. People still stared, but now it was with curiosity instead of suspicion. May's face lit up when they walked into the cafe. Well, look what the wind blew in. Thought you'd forgotten about civilization. Hard to forget when you keep sending supply wagons, Caleb said. Someone has to keep you fed. May poured coffee without asking, slid cups across the counter. You look like you've been fighting. Not yet, but probably soon. Caleb explained about price, the boundary markers, the implied threats. May's expression darkened. They pulled that on the Hendersons before they sold. Survey disputes, water access claims, all legal but crooked as a dog's hind leg. I need witnesses, people willing to document where the true boundaries are before the company muddles it too badly. I'll witness, and I'll talk to some folks. But Caleb, you know most people are scared. The company's got reach. I know, but I have to try. They spent the afternoon talking to ranchers, shopkeepers, anyone who might be willing to stand up. Most politely declined. Too risky, too expensive, too much trouble. A few, mostly men who'd worked with Caleb before, who owed him favors or respected his stubbornness, agreed to help. By evening, they had 5 witnesses willing to verify the boundary lines. Not many, but enough to establish a record. As they rode back to the ranch, Clara said, That went better than you expected. Did it? You thought no one would help, but they did. 5 people out of a town of 200. Not exactly a revolution. It's a start, and sometimes that's all you need. He glanced at her. When did you become an optimist? When I realized pessimism was just another way of giving up. She urged her horse faster. Come on, we've got fences to reset before dark. They worked the property lines for the next week, resetting stakes, documenting measurements, having witnesses sign statements about where boundaries had been for years. It was tedious, backbreaking work, but it established a record. The company didn't take it lying down. 2 days after they reset the northern boundary, someone cut Clara's clothesline and trampled the garden she'd been trying to coax into growth. Small vandalism, petty, but pointed. The day after that, someone poisoned the water trough. They lost half their chickens before Caleb figured it out. They're escalating, Clara said, looking at the dead birds scattered around the yard. Trying to make it too expensive to stay. Caleb's voice was flat, but she could see rage simmering beneath. Wear us down with 1,000 small cuts. It's not going to work. You don't know that. Yes, I do, because giving up isn't in your nature, or mine. She started gathering the dead chickens. We clean this up, we build a new trough, we keep going. Clara, no, don't. She turned to face him. Don't tell me to leave. Don't tell me it's too dangerous. We've had this conversation. I'm staying. You could die here. I could die anywhere. At least here I'm dying for something that matters. He stared at her, and something in his expression cracked. Why? Why does this matter so much to you? Because it's mine. The words came out fierce, raw. My choice, my work, my home. For the first time in my entire life, I'm not living by someone else's rules or trying to fit into someone else's idea of who I should be. I'm building something real, and I will not let some company lawyer take that away because it's inconvenient. Caleb crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, grabbed her shoulders. For a heartbeat, she thought he might shake her. Instead, he pulled her into a rough embrace, holding tight enough that she felt his heart hammering against her cheek. "You're going to drive me crazy," he said into her hair. "Probably. Stubborn, reckless woman. You wouldn't want me any other way." He pulled back just enough to look at her face. "No, I wouldn't." Something shifted between them, an acknowledgement of what had been building for weeks. Clara's breath caught. Caleb's hand came up to cup her cheek, calloused thumb brushing her cheekbone. Then a rifle shot cracked across the prairie. They broke apart, both diving for cover. Another shot, closer. Splinters exploded from the porch post where Clara had been standing seconds before. "The house!" Caleb shouted, grabbing her hand and running. They burst through the door, Caleb slamming it behind them. He grabbed rifles from the rack, tossed one to Clara. "Windows, stay low!" Clara crawled to the front window, peered out carefully. She could see movement in the rocks about 200 yards out. At least 2 shooters, maybe more. "Who are they?" she called. "Company men?" "Has to be." Caleb was at the side window, rifle ready. Warning shots probably, scare tactics. As if to prove him wrong, another shot punched through the window above Clara's head. Glass rained down. "Those aren't warning shots," she said. "No, they're not." For the next hour, they traded sporadic fire with the shooters. Clara's shoulder ached from the rifle's kick. Her ears rang from the percussion. But she kept firing, kept driving them back every time they tried to advance. As the sun set, the shooting stopped. Clara waited, tense, but no more shots came. Eventually, Caleb risked a look. "They're gone." "You sure?" "No. But it's getting dark. They'd be stupid to attack at night when they can't see what they're shooting at." Clara lowered her rifle, hands shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. "They tried to kill us." "Trying to scare us. If they wanted us dead, we'd be dead." But his voice was grim. "This is escalating faster than I expected. Price isn't playing anymore. What do we do?" "I ride to town at first light, get the sheriff out here, file a complaint. And if the sheriff's on the company payroll, then we're in serious trouble." He checked the damage, 3 broken windows, bullet holes in the walls, but nothing structural. "We board up the windows for tonight, take turns on watch, and tomorrow we figure out if we've got any law worth the name in this territory." They worked in tense silence, nailing boards over the broken windows, checking ammunition, preparing for another attack that might or might not come. When full dark fell, Caleb lit a single lantern and set it away from the windows. "You take first watch," he said. "I'll relieve you at midnight." But neither of them slept. They sat in the darkened house, rifles across their laps, listening to every sound. Wind in the grass, a coyote howling, the creak of settling timber. Near midnight, Clara finally said what had been bothering her. "If this keeps up, if they keep pushing, what's your line? Where do you say enough? You asking if I'd sell?" "I'm asking what you're willing to risk." "Your life? Mine?" Caleb was quiet for a long time. "When Sarah and Emma died, I thought about burning this place down myself, starting over somewhere new, but I couldn't. This land holds every memory I have of them, every moment of happiness. Leaving felt like betrayal. And now? Now I'm starting to have new memories. Good ones. You laughing when you finally drove that nail straight. Both of us covered in flour after you tried to make biscuits that first time. The way you look in the morning with the sunrise coming through your window." He met her eyes across the dark room. "This place isn't just a grave anymore. It's becoming something else. Something alive." Clara's throat tightened. "Caleb, I'm saying I'd walk away if it meant keeping you safe. The land matters, but it's not worth your life. That's not your choice to make. Like hell it isn't. It's my life, my risk. I get to decide what it's worth." They stared at each other, stubborn wills clashing in the darkness. Then Caleb laughed, short and rough. "We're going to argue about who gets to die for this ranch." "Apparently. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Welcome to knowing me." He shook his head, but he was almost smiling. "How about neither of us dies? How about we fight smart instead of hard? I'm listening. We can't beat the company head on. They've got money, lawyers, hired guns. But we can make it expensive for them, drag it out, make enough noise that it becomes a problem they don't want to deal with." He leaned forward. Tomorrow I talk to the sheriff. File a formal complaint. Then I send letters to the territorial governor, the land office, newspapers. Make this public. Companies like bad publicity. You think they'll back off? I think they'll think twice about murdering us if people are watching. It's not perfect, but it's something. Clara nodded slowly. All right, we try it your way. But if they come back shooting, I'm shooting back. Wouldn't expect anything else. Dawn came without another attack. Caleb rode to town as planned, leaving Clara alone with a rifle and instructions to shoot anyone who wasn't him. The morning dragged. She tried to work, cleaning, mending, anything to stay busy, but her ears strained for sounds of trouble. Caleb returned near noon with Sheriff Garrett. The sheriff looked tired and uncomfortable as he surveyed the damage. You're saying Consolidated Land Company hired men to shoot at you, he said, writing in a small notebook. I'm saying someone shot at us the day after we rejected their offer. You draw your own conclusions. Did you see the shooters clearly? Recognize anyone? Too far away. Any witnesses? Just us. The sheriff sighed. Mr. Rourke, I'll file the report, but without witnesses or proof it was company men, there's not much I can do. Convenient. It's the law. I can't arrest people based on suspicion. He tucked away the notebook. My advice? Accept their offer and move on. This isn't going to end well for you. Your advice or a threat? Common sense. Garrett headed for his horse. Watch yourself, Caleb. And Miss Whitmore. This country's rough on folks who don't know when to quit. After he left, Clara said, He's not going to help. No, probably on the company payroll like you said. Caleb pulled folded papers from his saddlebag. But I got these posted at the general store, telegraphed the territorial governor's office, and May's writing to her cousin who works for a Denver newspaper. You think it'll help? I think it's all we've got. The waiting was worse than the fighting. Days passed with no more attacks, but the tension wound tighter. Clara caught herself jumping at shadows, checking the horizon constantly. They took turns on watch every night. Sleep became a luxury measured in stolen hours. A week after the shooting, a man rode up carrying a surveyor's equipment. He introduced himself as Robert Chen, independent surveyor hired by the Territorial Land Office to investigate the boundary dispute. Someone filed a complaint, Chen explained, setting up his transit. I'm here to establish the legal property lines. Caleb and Clara watched him work, methodical and thorough. He measured, recorded, checked old survey maps. After 2 days, he packed his equipment. Your boundaries are exactly where you say they are, he told Caleb. The company markers were placed incorrectly. I'll file my report with the land office. Should resolve the legal dispute. Should? Nothing's certain, but you've got the law on your side, for whatever that's worth. Chen tipped his hat. Good luck, Mr. Rourke. You're going to need it. That night, Clara found Caleb on the porch, staring at the dark prairie. She sat beside him. One battle won, she said. They'll find another way to come at us. Let them. We'll handle it. He glanced at her. You ever get tired of fighting? Every day. But the alternative is giving up, and I'm not good at that. No, you're not. He reached over, took her hand. His palm was rough, warm, solid. I'm glad you're here, even with everything. Maybe especially because of everything. Clara threaded her fingers through his. Where else would I be? Boston. Somewhere safe. Married to a man who deserves you. I tried that, remember? Didn't work out so well. She squeezed his hand. Besides, I like it here. The work, the land, the view. She paused. The company. Even when bullets are flying? Especially then. Nothing like mortal danger to make you appreciate the simple things. He laughed quietly. You're terrible. You love it. The word hung between them. Love. Neither of them had said it, but it was there, growing in the spaces between words, in shared work and shared danger, in the way they'd learned to move around each other like parts of the same organism. Caleb turned to face her, his expression serious in the starlight. Clara, I need to tell you something. Her heart stuttered. All right. When you first showed up, I thought you'd last maybe a week. Soft city woman playing at ranch life. I figured you'd get tired and leave. Thanks for the vote of confidence. Let me finish. I was wrong. You're the strongest person I've ever met. Not because you're tough, though you are, but because you keep choosing this. Every day you could leave, and every day you stay. That takes a kind of courage I didn't know existed. Clara's eyes stung. Caleb, I'm not good at this. Talking, feelings. But you should know that you've become, he paused, searching for words, essential. To this place. To me. I don't know how to do this without you anymore. Don't want to learn. You won't have to. She cupped his face with her free hand. I'm not going anywhere. Even with the company trying to kill us? Even then. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. His lips met hers, gentle at first, then deeper. She tasted smoke and coffee and something indefinable that was just him, her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. That was about time, Clara finished. I was going to say unexpected. Liar. You've been thinking about it for weeks. Maybe. He pulled back just enough to see her face. Still unexpected. Good unexpected or bad? Good. Very good. He stood, pulled her up with him. Come on, we should get some sleep while we can. Together? I'm not letting you out of my sight. Company might attack again. Is that your excuse? It's a good one. They went inside, and for the first time since the shooting, Clara felt something other than fear. Hope, maybe. Or just the simple certainty that whatever came next, they'd face it together. The attack came 3 nights later. Not gunfire this time. Fire. Clara woke to the smell of smoke, Caleb shaking her shoulder. The barn, he said tersely. It's burning. They ran outside to find the structure fully engulfed, flames shooting into the night sky. Bess the horse was screaming inside. The water barrels, Caleb shouted, already running, but they both knew it was too late to save the barn. All they could do was keep the fire from spreading to the house. They hauled water in desperate relay, wetting down the house walls, the nearby grass, anything that might catch. The barn collapsed in a shower of sparks. Bess's screaming stopped. Clara stood frozen, bucket in hand, staring at the inferno. They'd saved the house, but they'd lost everything else. Tools, feed, the horse. Months of work gone in minutes. Caleb's face was blank, carefully empty. They're not playing anymore. No. This is where you leave, tonight. I'll take you to town, put you on the first train east. This isn't your fight. Clara looked at the burning barn, at the man beside her who was trying to push her away to keep her safe, at the ranch they'd rebuilt together, now burning again. No, she said. Clara, they tried to burn us alive, and we survived, again. She set down the bucket, faced him. I'm not leaving. You can argue until you're blue in the face, but I'm not going anywhere. So you can either accept my help or waste energy fighting me. Your choice. He stared at her, and something broke in his expression. Anger, fear, frustration, all of it crumbling into something raw. I can't lose you, he said, voice cracking. Sarah and Emma, I couldn't save them. If something happens to you because of my stubborn pride, it won't be your fault. It'll be my choice. She grabbed his soot-covered shirt. You don't get to make decisions for me. You don't get to send me away for my own good. I'm staying because I choose to. Because this place matters. Because you matter. Even if it kills you? Even then. They stood in the firelight, 2 people too stubborn to quit, too damaged to walk away. Then Caleb kissed her, hard and desperate and full of everything he couldn't say. When they pulled apart, the barn was still burning. The company was still threatening. The future was still uncertain, but they were together. And for now, that was enough. The barn smoldered for 2 days, sending up thin columns of smoke that could be seen for miles. A reminder. A warning. Clara and Caleb worked around the blackened skeleton, salvaging what little they could. A few tools that had survived, some scorched leather tack, nails melted into useless lumps. They didn't talk much. What was there to say? The company had made its point clear: leave or lose everything. On the third morning, May arrived with a wagon full of supplies and 3 men Clara didn't recognize. They climbed down without being asked and started unloading lumber. "What's this?" Caleb asked. "A barn raising." May planted her hands on her hips. "You think you're the only stubborn fool in this territory? These are the Garrett brothers. No relation to the sheriff, thank goodness. They've got a ranch east of here. Company's been pressuring them too." The oldest brother, a weathered man with a scarred face, nodded at Caleb. "Figured if we're all going down, might as well go down fighting. You need a barn. We'll help build one." "I can't pay." "Nobody asked you to." The man spat tobacco juice. "Besides, sooner or later they'll come for us too. Helping you is helping ourselves." Over the next week, others arrived. Jake, the young cowboy who taught Clara to ride. 2 farmers who'd lost access to their water after the company rerouted a creek. A shopkeeper who'd been undercut by company stores. One by one, people who'd been silent before found their voices. They built the barn in 5 days. Not fancy, but solid. Clara worked alongside them, holding boards, driving nails, learning that community could be built as surely as structures. At night, people camped around the ranch, sharing food and stories and a growing anger at what the company was doing. On the last day, as they raised the roof beam, Edmund Price rode up with 6 armed men. The work stopped. Tools lowered. Hands drifted toward weapons. Price surveyed the crowd with barely concealed contempt. "Well, quite the gathering. What is this? A social? Barn raising?" May called out. "You know, the thing neighbors do when someone's property mysteriously burns down." Mysterious indeed. Price's smile was thin. "I'm here to deliver a message from the company. Final offer, $2,500 for the property. That's generous considering the recent incidents." "Not interested," Caleb said. "Perhaps you didn't hear me. Final offer." "I heard you fine. Answer's still no." Price's expression hardened. "You're making a mistake, all of you." His gaze swept the crowd. "The company has long memories. We remember who stands against us." "Good," one of the Garrett brothers said. "Makes it easier for us to remember who to avoid in town." A few people laughed. Not much, but enough to show they weren't scared, or were choosing not to show it. Price's jaw clenched. "You have 1 week to reconsider. After that, the offer is withdrawn and the company pursues other remedies." "What kind of remedies?" Clara stepped forward. "Legal ones, Miss Whitmore. Foreclosure proceedings, tax assessments. The machinery of law moves slowly, but inevitably." He turned his horse. 1 week. I suggest you use it wisely." After he left, the mood was somber. People finished the barn in near silence, then started packing up. "Thank you," Caleb told each person as they left. This meant something. The oldest Garrett brother paused. "Company's going to come at all of us now. We stood together today. Question is whether we'll stand together when it gets worse." "Will you?" The man looked at his brothers, at the others loading wagons. "Ask me in a week. See if we're all still here." It was an honest answer, at least. That night, alone again, Clara and Caleb sat in the new barn. It still smelled like fresh-cut wood and possibility. "They won't back down," Caleb said. "Neither will we." "Clara, there's something you need to understand. If this goes to court, foreclosure, tax disputes, whatever legal weapon they use, I'll lose. I don't have money for lawyers, don't have political connections. The company will bury me in paperwork until I have to sell, just to pay the fees. Then we don't let it go to court. How do we stop it?" She'd been thinking about this for days. "We make them want to stop. Right now, this is a minor irritation to them. One stubborn rancher holding up their expansion. But if we turn it into a public scandal, if newspapers start writing about Eastern companies using violence and intimidation to steal land from settlers, suddenly it's not worth the trouble." "You're talking about going to the press." "May's cousin works for the Denver paper, and I can write. I was educated, remember? Before everything fell apart." She stood pacing. "We document everything, the shootings, the fires, the boundary fraud. We get sworn statements from witnesses. We turn this into a story people care about. They'll come after you. They're already coming after me. At least this way, we fight back. Caleb watched her pace, something like admiration in his eyes. When did you become a strategist? When bullets started flying. She stopped in front of him. What do you think? I think it's risky. I think the company has deep pockets and might own half the newspapers already. I think we could lose everything and accomplish nothing. But it's better than waiting to be crushed. He stood, pulled her close. All right, we do it your way. You write, I'll gather witnesses. We make enough noise that they can't ignore us. They spent the next 3 days building their case. Clara interviewed everyone who'd been harassed by the company, writing down dates, names, incidents in careful detail. The Garrett brothers had records of company men destroying their irrigation system. Jake remembered seeing Price's men near the ranch the night before the barn fire. The farmer described how surveyors had shown up with armed escorts, intimidating anyone who questioned their measurements. Clara wrote it all down, then crafted it into a letter to May's cousin. Not dry facts, but a story. Settlers trying to build lives in harsh territory. A company using violence and legal trickery to steal their land. The failure of local law enforcement to protect citizens. She read it to Caleb by lamplight. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. It's good, he said finally. Might even be too good. This makes the company look like criminals. They are criminals. Making them look like it in print is different. They'll sue for libel. Let them. Everything in here is documented and witnessed. She folded the letter. Besides, the lawsuit itself will be news, more publicity they don't want. You've thought this through. I've had plenty of time to think while rebuilding barns. He smiled slightly. Send it. Let's see what happens. May took the letter to town the next day, promised to telegraph her cousin immediately. Now there was nothing to do but wait. The waiting ate at them. Every noise brought them to the windows, hands on rifles. Every rider in the distance could be company men. They slept in shifts, kept weapons loaded, jumped at shadows. 4 days after they sent the letter, a different kind of visitor arrived. A woman, traveling alone, dressed in practical clothing that had seen hard miles. She introduced herself as Catherine Morrison, journalist from Denver. I received your letter from my colleague, she said, settling at their kitchen table with a notebook. Tell me everything. Clara glanced at Caleb. This was happening. No going back now. She told the story, starting with Thomas Mercer's rejection, the fire that had brought her and Caleb together, the company's escalating campaign. Morrison wrote furiously, asking sharp questions, pushing for details. You have witnesses who will verify this? Morrison asked. 12, maybe more. I'll need to talk to them, and I'll need to see the property damage, the altered boundary markers, everything. She looked up from her notes. I should warn you, this is going to make waves. The company will come after you harder once this publishes. How much harder can they come, Wilson? Caleb asked. Morrison's expression was grim. You'd be surprised. I've covered land disputes before. Companies like this don't just give up because of bad publicity. Sometimes it makes them more determined to win. Then why publish it? Clara asked. Because it levels the field. Right now they operate in shadows, where people are scared to talk. Once it's public, they have to be more careful. They can't make you disappear without people noticing. She closed her notebook. I'll stay in town for a few days, interview witnesses, document everything. My article runs in a week. After that, things are going to get interesting. After she left, Caleb pulled Clara into his arms. No turning back now. No. Scared. Terrified. She looked up at him, but also relieved. At least we're doing something instead of just waiting to be destroyed. That's one way to look at it. You have a better way? No. He kissed her forehead. Just making sure you know what we're getting into. I know, and I'm still here. Morrison was true to her word. Over the next days, Clara saw her around town, notebook in hand, interviewing everyone who'd had dealings with Consolidated Land Company. The sheriff looked nervous. Edmund Price looked furious. On the 6th day of their ultimatum week, Price returned with an entourage. Not hired guns this time, men in suits carrying leather document cases. Mr. Rourke, Miss Whitmore. Price's voice was ice. I understand you've been talking to journalists, spreading lies about the company. Not lies. Facts. Facts are subjective. The company's lawyers, he gestured at the suited men, disagree with your interpretation. They're here to serve you with papers. One of the lawyers stepped forward, handed Caleb a thick envelope. Notice of foreclosure proceedings. The bank that holds your property loan has been acquired by Consolidated Land Company. We're calling the loan due immediately. You have 30 days to pay in full or vacate. Caleb's face went white. I've never missed a payment. The terms of the loan allow the lender to call it due at any time. You signed the agreement. The lawyer's smile was professional, empty. If you can't pay, the property will be sold at auction to satisfy the debt. How much? Claire asked. $1,500, due in 30 days. It might as well have been $15,000. They both knew Caleb didn't have it. Price's smile was triumphant. Still want to talk to journalists, Mr. Rourke? Because they can't help you now. This is all perfectly legal. After they left, Caleb sat at the table staring at the foreclosure notice like it might change if he looked long enough. There has to be a way, Clara said. There isn't. I don't have $1,500. Don't have $500. The ranch is worth more than that, but I can't sell it and pay off the loan because they own the loan. He laughed bitterly. They've got me trapped. The article won't stop a foreclosure. Morrison was right. Publishing might make them more careful about violence, but they don't need violence now. They've got the law on their side. Claire's mind raced. $1,500. An impossible sum. Unless… The auction? She said slowly. When they auction the property, anyone can bid, right? Theoretically, but the company will bid whatever it takes to win. What if we had enough to outbid them? Not to win, just to drive the price up so high it's not worth it to them? Caleb shook his head. We don't have that kind of money. Nobody does. Not one person, but a lot of people together? She grabbed his hand. The people who helped rebuild the barn, the ones the company's been pressuring, what if they pooled resources, bought the ranch collectively? Why would they do that? Because if the company gets your land, your water rights, your access, they'll use it to squeeze everyone else. But if the community owns it together, shares the resources, stands united. She was talking faster now, excitement building. It's not just about saving your ranch. It's about all of them. That's a hell of a gamble. So is everything else we've done. She stood. I'm going to town. I'm going to talk to people, see if it's even possible. Clara. What? You have a better idea? He didn't. They both knew it. She rode to town at dawn, hitting May's first. May listened to the plan, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. Community ownership, May said. It's been done before. Communal grazing lands, shared water rights, might work. But will people put up money? For themselves, maybe. The Garretts have been talking about organizing. This might give them a framework. She grabbed her shawl. Come on, let's find out. They spent the day going door to door explaining the situation. The reaction was mixed. Some people were interested but cautious. Others flat out refused. Too risky, too expensive, too likely to bring company retaliation down on their heads. By evening, they had tentative commitments for $800. Not enough. We need more time, May said. More people. If Morrison's article runs first, gets people angry, maybe we can raise the rest. We have 30 days. Then we use every single one of them. Over the next week, Morrison's article hit newspapers across the territory. The headline was blunt. Land company uses violence and fraud to steal settler property. The article laid out everything. The shootings, the arson, the boundary fraud, the foreclosure trap. It named names, quoted witnesses, painted a damning picture of corporate greed crushing honest settlers. The response was immediate. Letters flooded the Denver paper, most supportive. A territorial representative announced an investigation into land company practices. 2 other newspapers picked up the story, running their own editorials condemning Consolidated Land Company. And people started showing up at the ranch. Not company men this time. Ordinary people. Some came to offer support, others to share their own stories of being pressured by the company. A few came with money, small amounts, $5 here, 10 there. Every contribution was carefully recorded. By the third week, they'd raised $1,200. Still, 300 short. It's not going to be enough, Caleb said. Clara refused to accept it. She wrote more letters, contacted everyone May knew, anyone who might help. But time was running out. 2 days before the auction, Jake rode up with news. The Garrett brothers sold their south pasture. They're putting the money toward the bid. How much? 200. Still 100 short. Clara felt despair clawing at her throat. Then, the day before the auction, a telegram arrived. It was from a group of Denver businessmen who'd read Morrison's articles. They were offering a loan, $500 at fair terms, to help fight the company's monopolistic practices. Clara read the telegram 3 times to make sure she wasn't imagining it. "We have more than enough," she told Caleb, voice shaking. "We can bid. We can actually bid." That night, they went over the plan. May would hold the money, act as bidder for the community group. If they won, the property would be held in trust, managed by a committee of local ranchers with Caleb as primary operator. Everyone who'd contributed would have voting rights on major decisions. It wasn't perfect. It meant Caleb would no longer own the ranch outright. But it meant he could stay. They could stay. The auction was held at the town hall, packed with people. Edmund Price sat in front with company lawyers, confident and smug. The auctioneer, a thin man who looked uncomfortable with the whole proceeding, called for order. "This is a foreclosure auction for the property known as the Rourke Ranch. Opening bid is $1,500 to satisfy the debt. Do I hear 1,500? Price raised his hand. 1,500. Do I hear 16? May raised her hand. 1,600. Price didn't even blink. 2,000. May. 2,100. Price 2,500. The bidding climbed. 3,000. 3,500. Clara's heart hammered. They had just under $1,700 total. They couldn't win. All they could do was make it expensive. May kept bidding, pushing the price higher. 4,000. 4,500. Price's smile was starting to crack. The company hadn't expected real competition. At 5,000, May paused. It was more than double what the property was worth. One more bid and she'd be out. Price raised his hand. 5,500. The room went silent. May looked at Clara and Caleb, shook her head slightly. They were done. Then someone stood up in the back. The oldest Garrett brother. "I'll cover the difference, Sheetham," he said. "Property rights matter. Company can't be allowed to win this way." Price's face went purple. 6,000. Another voice. "We match it." 7,000, Price snarled. 8. The Garrett brothers' voice was steady. "I'll mortgage my own place if I have to. But the company doesn't win today." Price looked at his lawyers. They whispered urgently. The cost had spiraled out of control. For a property they could have bought for $2,000. They were now facing 8,000, 4 times market value, and there was no guarantee the bidding would stop. Finally, Price stood. "The company withdraws." The room erupted. The auctioneer had to bang his gavel repeatedly for order. "Sold to May Henderson, representing the Rourke Ranch Community Trust for $8,000. People cheered. May was swarmed with handshakes and backslaps. The Garrett brother waved off thanks, saying only, "We take care of our own." Clara found Caleb in the crowd, his expression stunned. She grabbed his hand and he pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. "We did it," he said, voice rough. "We actually did it." "We did." Outside, Price stopped them on the steps. His fury was barely contained. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "The company will appeal. We'll find other ways." "Maybe," Clara said. "But you lost today, in front of everyone. Your reputation took a hit. Was it worth it? You have no idea what you've started." Neither do you." He left, and Clara let out a breath she'd been holding for weeks. That night, the community threw together a celebration at May's. Food appeared from nowhere. Someone produced a fiddle, and people who'd been strangers weeks ago drank and laughed and danced. Caleb pulled Clara outside where it was quieter. "I need to say something," he said. "All right." "When I lost Sarah and Emma, I thought I'd never feel alive again. Thought the best I could do was survive, keep working, wait to die." He took her hands. Then you showed up, stubborn, reckless, refusing to quit. You reminded me what it felt like to fight for something, to hope. Clara's eyes stung. Caleb? Let me finish. This ranch, it's not really mine anymore. It belongs to everyone who helped save it, but that's okay. Because I realized something today. The land was never what mattered most. It was having someone to build it with. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a simple gold band. This was Sarah's, but she'd want you to have it, if you'll take it. Clara stared at the ring, throat tight. You asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking if you'll marry me. Build a life here. Not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you choose to. His voice softened. Choose me. She looked at this man who'd saved her life, who'd let her save his, who'd fought beside her when they had every reason to give up, who'd become home in ways she'd never imagined. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, and kissed her while music spilled from May's cafe and stars wheeled overhead. Inside, someone noticed them and a cheer went up. May appeared with cups of something strong, thrusting them into their hands. A toast, she called, to Caleb and Clara, who proved that stubborn beats rich every damn time. People laughed and drank, and the celebration continued into the night. Later, walking back to the ranch under a sky full of stars, Clara said, We're going to have to deal with the company again. You know that. I know. They won't stop. This fight isn't over. Probably not. He pulled her closer. But we don't have to fight it alone anymore. We've got people now. Community. Think it'll be enough? Has to be. It's all we've got. He stopped, turned to face her. But whatever comes, we face it together. That's enough for me. Clara looked at the ring on her finger, at the man who'd given it to her, at the dark prairie stretching endlessly in all directions. Harsh land, hard life. No guarantees, but it was hers. They'd built it together from ash and stubbornness and refusing to break. Together, she agreed. Whatever comes. And somewhere in the darkness, the land seemed to breathe with them, wild and fierce and unforgiving, but theirs nonetheless. The wedding happened 3 weeks later in May's cafe, with half the town crammed into a space meant for 20. Clara wore a simple dress May had helped her sew, cream-colored cotton with lace at the collar, nothing fancy but clean and new. Caleb wore his only suit, brushed and pressed, looking uncomfortable but determined. There was no minister. The town's preacher had quietly left a month ago, and nobody had bothered to replace him. Instead, the territorial judge rode out from the county seat, a grizzled man named Hutchins who'd seen enough frontier weddings to keep the ceremony mercifully short. Do you take this woman? He asked Caleb. I do. Do you take this man? Clara looked at Caleb, scarred, stubborn, hers, and felt something settle in her chest. I do. Then you're married. Someone get these people a drink. The celebration was loud and genuine. May had cooked for days. The Garrett brothers brought whiskey. Someone played fiddle while people danced in the cramped space, bumping tables and laughing. It wasn't elegant or refined, but it was real in ways Clara's Boston life had never been. Late in the evening, Edmund Price appeared in the doorway. The music died. Hands moved toward weapons. Price raised his empty palms. I'm not here for trouble, he said. Just came to deliver a message. Then deliver it and leave, Caleb said. Price pulled an envelope from his coat. The company is withdrawing from this territory. The board decided the publicity and legal costs aren't worth the trouble. They're selling all local holdings and moving operations south. He set the envelope on the nearest table. That's the deed transfer for the parcels adjacent to your property. No charge. Consider it a wedding gift. Nobody moved. It felt like a trap. Why? Clara asked. Because Morrison's articles went national. 3 other territories are now investigating the company's practices. Congressional oversight is being discussed. The board decided to cut losses and retreat. Price's smile was thin, bitter. You won! Congratulations! Just like that? Caleb's voice was skeptical. You terrorized us for months and now you're walking away? Not walking, running. There's a difference. Price looked around the room. You people made this too expensive. Not just money. Reputation, political capital, future opportunities. The board decided you're not worth it. He headed for the door, paused. For what it's worth, I told them you'd fight harder than they expected. Nobody listened. After he left, the room stayed silent for a long moment. Then someone laughed, nervous and relieved, and suddenly everyone was talking at once. May grabbed the envelope, examined the deed transfer. It's legitimate. They're really gone. The Garrett brother who'd mortgaged his ranch raised his glass. To stubborn fools who don't know when to quit. Everyone drank to that. Clara found Caleb outside, staring at the dark street. She slipped her hand into his. "We won," she said. "We survived. There's a difference." "Is there?" "I don't know." He turned to face her. "Part of me kept expecting to die fighting them. Now I have to figure out how to actually live." Clara corrected. "We have to figure it out." "Right, we." He pulled her close. "I'm not used to that yet." "You'll learn." They stayed like that, holding each other in the darkness while celebration noise spilled from May's cafe. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the ranch to run, debts to pay, a community trust to manage. But tonight, they'd earned peace. The first year of marriage was harder than either expected. Not the relationship, that worked in ways that surprised them both, but running a ranch that belonged to a dozen families, each with opinions about how things should be done, tested patience neither of them had in abundance. The community meetings were the worst. Held monthly in the new barn, they inevitably devolved into arguments about water rights, grazing rotation, equipment purchases. Clara learned to navigate between competing interests, to find compromises that left everyone equally unhappy. "Democracy is exhausting," she told May one afternoon, nursing a headache after a particularly contentious meeting about fence repairs. "Democracy is people," May said. "And people are exhausting, but it's better than the alternative." "Is it?" "You'd rather have the company back?" "No, but some days I understand why dictators are tempting." May laughed. "Give it time. People will settle." They did, eventually. The first successful cattle drive, bringing decent money that was distributed fairly among all the contributors, helped. So did the first winter, when the community pooled resources to make sure everyone had enough feed and firewood. Slowly, the arrangement stopped feeling like an obligation and started feeling like something intentional. Clara found her role in it. She couldn't rope cattle or shoe horses, but she could keep books, negotiate prices, write letters to buyers in Denver and beyond. Her Boston education, once a liability in this rough territory, became an asset. She turned the ranch into a functioning business, not just a survival operation. Caleb noticed. "You're good at this," he said one evening, watching her work through receipts by lamplight. "At what?" "Making things work, finding solutions." He sat across from her. "When you first got here, you couldn't drive a nail straight. Now you're running a cooperative that feeds 24 families." "We're running it." "No, this part is you. I can work cattle and fix fences, but the business side, that's your gift." Clara set down her pen. "You're not bothered by it?" "Some men would be." "Some men are idiots." He reached across the table, took her hand. "I'm grateful. You turned a struggling ranch into something sustainable. Why would I be bothered? Because I'm a woman doing man's work? You're my wife doing the work that needs doing. That's all that matters." It was one of the things Clara loved about him, his complete lack of concern for what people thought proper or appropriate. Out here, survival mattered more than propriety. Spring brought a surprise visitor. A well-dressed woman stepped off the train, hired a buggy, and drove straight to the ranch. Clara was working in the garden when she arrived. "Clara Whitmore?" the woman called. "Or is it Rourke now?" Clara straightened, wiping dirt from her hands. "Rourke, can I help you?" "I'm Victoria Chen from the Women's Suffrage Association in Denver. I've been reading about you." Clara blinked. "Me?" "You and the land cooperative, the way you organized the community, fought off a corporation, created a sustainable model for shared resources." Victoria smiled. "We're interested in using your story to demonstrate what women can accomplish when given opportunity and authority." "I'm not sure it's that significant. You're managing a business that supports 24 families. You negotiated contracts with Eastern buyers. You helped establish a legal framework for community land ownership that's being studied by territorial lawmakers. Victoria pulled out a notebook. I'd say that's significant. Over tea, Clara told the story, not the dramatic version with shootings and fires, but the practical reality of building something from nothing. Victoria took notes furiously. Would you be willing to speak at our convention in Denver next month? Victoria asked. We need examples of women succeeding in non-traditional roles. Your story could inspire others. Clara hesitated. I'm not a speaker. You don't have to be polished, just honest. Tell women what you learned, what you do differently, how you made it work. After Victoria left, Clara sat in the garden thinking. A year ago, she'd been a rejected mail-order bride sleeping in a closet-sized room. Now someone wanted her to speak at a convention about success. Life had a strange sense of humor. Caleb found her there as the sun set. What did she want? To use me as an example of female achievement. He sat beside her in the dirt, unconcerned about his clean pants. You gonna do it? I don't know. It feels dishonest. I didn't set out to achieve anything. I was just trying not to die. That's what achievement is, though. Doing what needs doing, even when it's hard. He plucked a weed she'd missed. You should go. Tell them how you built this. We built it. I swing hammers and wrangle cattle. You built the structure that holds it all together. He looked at her seriously. Don't minimize what you've done, Clara. It matters. She went to Denver. The convention was intimidating. Hundreds of educated, eloquent women discussing voting rights and property laws and educational reform. Clara felt out of place in her simple dress, with her work-roughened hands and sun-darkened skin. But when she spoke, telling the plain truth of how she'd survived and built and fought, the room went silent. Women leaned forward, taking notes, nodding recognition. When she finished, the applause was genuine. Afterward, women surrounded her with questions. How did you convince men to share ownership? How did you learn business management? What advice would you give women starting with nothing? Clara answered as honestly as she could. Don't wait for permission. Do the work even when you're terrified. Find people who believe in shared success instead of individual glory. Accept that you'll fail sometimes, and do it anyway. On the train home, she stared out the window at passing prairie and thought about the question she'd been asked most. Would you do it again, knowing how hard it would be? Yes. Without hesitation, yes. Because hard didn't mean worthless. The things that mattered most were almost always difficult. Back at the ranch, life continued its rhythm. The cooperative grew. 2 more families joined, adding their land and labor. They expanded the cattle operation, added sheep, started a small dairy. Clara hired a teacher for the children. The community was large enough now to need a school. The town changed too. With the land company gone, small businesses flourished. A new bank opened, run by local investors. The general store expanded. Someone started a newspaper, weekly, barely 4 pages, but a newspaper nonetheless. Clara and Caleb's story became local legend, embellished in the telling, of course. By some accounts, Clara had single-handedly fought off a dozen armed men. Others claimed Caleb had punched a lawyer through a window. The truth was less dramatic but more meaningful. On their 2nd anniversary, they sat on the porch watching sunset paint the prairie gold and red. The ranch, their ranch, everyone's ranch, spread around them, solid, thriving, real. You ever miss Boston? Caleb asked. Clara considered it. I miss some things. Libraries, music, food that doesn't involve beans. She leaned against him. But no, I don't miss the life I had there. That Clara was someone else. Who was she? Someone waiting for life to happen to her. Someone who thought she needed permission to exist. Clara looked at her hands, scarred, capable, strong. I like who I am now better. Even covered in dirt and manure? Especially then. He laughed, that rare, genuine sound she'd learned to treasure. I'm glad you stayed. Where else would I go? Anywhere. You could have gone anywhere after we won. May would have kept you on. Victoria Chen offered you a job with the Suffrage Association. You had options. I chose this one. Why? Clara thought about it. Because this is where I'm needed. Not in a desperate way like when I first arrived, but in a good way. The cooperative needs someone who can manage the business side. The community needs someone who will fight for fair treatment. You need, she paused, smiled, someone to keep you from punching lawyers. That's a full-time job. Lucky I'm qualified. They sat in comfortable silence as stars emerged. After a while, Clara said, I'm pregnant. Caleb went very still. You're sure? As sure as I can be. 3 months, maybe. And how do you feel about it? She heard the fear in his voice. He'd lost a child before. The wound hadn't fully healed, probably never would. Terrified, she admitted. But happy. Is that strange? No. He pulled her closer, carefully, as if she might break. When Sarah was pregnant with Emma, I was terrified the whole time. Terrified something would go wrong, that I wouldn't be a good father, that I'd fail them somehow. And then? Then Emma was born, and I was even more terrified, but also amazed. This tiny person who needed everything from me. His voice roughened. I was a good father. For the time I had. Clara turned to face him. You'll be a good father again. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because you don't run from hard things. Because you show up even when you're scared. Because you've already survived losing everything and you're still here, still building, still trying. She took his hand, placed it on her still flat stomach. This child will be lucky to have you. Or cursed to have my stubbornness. They'll have mine too. Poor kid doesn't stand a chance. That surprised a laugh out of him. We're going to be terrible parents. Probably, but we'll try hard. That counts for something. The pregnancy was difficult. Clara was sick for months, couldn't keep food down, lost weight instead of gaining it. Doc Peterson, the new doctor who'd settled in town, visited weekly, concerned but trying not to show it. You need to rest more, he told her. I'm running a business. The business will survive without you for a few months. You might not. But Clara couldn't stop. There were contracts to negotiate, accounts to balance, disputes to mediate. She worked until exhaustion forced her to stop, then pushed through anyway. Caleb finally intervened. You're going to kill yourself. I'm fine. You're not. You fainted yesterday. May found you in the garden. I just got dizzy. Clara. He grabbed her shoulders, not roughly but firmly. I can't lose you. I won't survive it again. Please, rest. The fear in his eyes broke through her stubbornness. She let May take over the bookkeeping, let the Garrett brothers handle buyer negotiations, let herself rest. It helped. By the 7th month, she'd gained weight, the sickness had passed, and she could feel the baby moving, strong kicks that made her breathless. Active, Doc Peterson said, listening to the heartbeat. That's good. Strong. Like their mother, Caleb said. Like both parents. The doctor packed his bag. Another 2 months. You're doing well, Mrs. Rourke. The baby came early, on a cold November night when the first snow was falling. Clara woke to pain that stole her breath. Caleb rode for the doctor while May stayed with her, coaching her through contractions. It was brutal. Hours of pain that felt endless. Clara screamed until her voice gave out, gripped May's hand hard enough to leave bruises. I can't, she gasped between contractions. I can't do this. Yes, you can, May said firmly. You've done harder things. Name one. You rebuilt a ranch from ashes. You fought off a land company. You learned to shoot. This is just one more impossible thing you're going to do. The baby came at dawn. Arriving with a furious cry that filled the room, Doc Peterson caught her, held her up. It's a girl, he said. Clara collapsed back, exhausted beyond measure. Caleb appeared in the doorway, face pale with worry. Clara? I'm fine. We're fine. She held out her arms. We have a daughter. He crossed the room in 2 strides, took the baby from the doctor with shaking hands. The infant was tiny, red-faced, perfect. She's beautiful, Caleb whispered. She looks like an angry potato. The most beautiful potato I've ever seen. He sat beside Clara, placed the baby in her arms. What should we name her? Clara looked at the tiny face, the dark eyes blinking in the lamplight. Sarah, for your first wife, and Emma for her middle name, so they're part of her. Caleb's eyes filled. You don't have to. I want to. They're part of your story, part of what made you who you are. She touched the baby's tiny hand. Sarah Emma Rourke. She'll carry their names forward. He kissed Clara's forehead, then the baby's. Thank you. The first year of motherhood nearly broke Clara. She'd thought ranch work was exhausting, but nothing prepared her for the relentless demands of an infant. Sarah cried constantly, slept in short bursts, needed feeding every few hours. Clara walked the floor at night, bouncing the screaming baby, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake. I'm failing at this, she told May one afternoon, near tears from exhaustion. You're not. You're learning. There's a difference. She hates me. She's a baby. She doesn't hate you. She's just loud. May took Sarah, who immediately quieted. See? She's just tired. Then why doesn't she sleep? Because babies are irrational, tiny dictators. You survive them. You don't reason with them. Clara laughed despite herself. That's the best parenting advice I've heard. Caleb helped when he could, walking Sarah when she cried at night, giving Clara breaks to sleep. But he had ranch work. Someone had to keep things running. Clara felt the weight of it all pressing down, suffocating. She was folding laundry one afternoon when she just stopped, stood in the middle of the kitchen with a tiny dress in her hands, and felt overwhelmed by the impossibility of everything. Sarah was crying in the bedroom. The accounts needed updating. The cooperative meeting was tomorrow and she hadn't prepared. Dinner needed cooking. The laundry was endless, and she was so tired she could barely think. She sat on the floor and cried. That's where Caleb found her. He picked up Sarah, soothed her, then sat beside Clara. What do you need? He asked. Sleep. About a year's worth. What else? I don't know. Help. Someone to take over everything for just one day so I can breathe. Then that's what you'll get. He stood, still holding Sarah. I'm calling an emergency cooperative meeting. Everyone's going to take shifts helping with the baby and the household work. You're taking a week off. I can't. You can. You're not allowed to be self-sufficient right now. We're a community. That means we support each other. The cooperative responded. Women took turns watching Sarah, bringing meals, helping with chores. Men handled ranch work without bothering Caleb with every decision. For 1 week, Clara slept, read a book, took a bath that wasn't rushed. When she came back, she felt human again. Thank you, she told the group at the next meeting. That's what this is, the oldest Garrett brother said. We help each other. You've done it for us plenty of times. It was a lesson Clara relearned constantly. She didn't have to do everything alone. Asking for help wasn't weakness. Community meant carrying each other when the weight got too heavy. Sarah grew, started crawling, then walking, then running everywhere with the boundless energy of toddlers. She was fearless, climbing things she shouldn't, chasing chickens, following Caleb around the ranch like a devoted shadow. She's got your stubbornness, Clara told Caleb, watching their daughter refuse to come inside for dinner. And your complete disregard for common sense. Fair. By the time Sarah was 3, the ranch had become something neither Clara nor Caleb had imagined. The cooperative owned over 5,000 acres, supporting 30 families. They'd built a school, a community hall, a shared barn for equipment. It wasn't just a ranch anymore. It was a town, small and rough, but growing. Clara still managed the business side, but she'd trained others to help. The burden was shared now. On difficult days, she remembered being that desperate woman stepping off the train with nothing. How far she'd come, how much she'd built. One evening, she found a letter in the mail. From Thomas Mercer's lawyer. He'd died, the letter said, and in his will he'd left Clara a formal apology and a small sum of money. Conscience money, Caleb said, reading over her shoulder. Probably. Clara set the letter aside. Strange. If he'd married me, none of this would exist. The cooperative, the community, Sarah, none of it. You think you'd have been happy with him? No, I'd have been comfortable maybe. Safe, but not happy. Not like this. Even with all the hard parts. especially with all the hard parts. She looked at him. Easy doesn't build character. Struggle does. That's very philosophical. I'm very wise in my old age. You're 28. Ancient. He pulled her close. Thank you. For what? For staying, for fighting, for building this with me. He gestured at the ranch, the cooperative, everything they'd created. For being too stubborn to give up. You're welcome. Clara leaned into him. Thank you for giving me a reason to stay. They stood on the porch watching Sarah chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. The prairie stretched endlessly around them, still harsh, still unforgiving. But theirs. Built from nothing by two people who'd lost everything and found each other in the ruins. Years passed. Sarah grew into a fierce, bright child who asked constant questions and climbed everything. The cooperative expanded further, became a model studied by other territories. Clara traveled occasionally, speaking about cooperative ownership and women's business management. Caleb stayed home, preferring ranch work to publicity. On their 10th anniversary, they stood in the same spot where Clara had first seen the ranch burning. A new barn stood there now. Horses grazed peacefully. Children played in the distance. You ever regret it? Clara asked. Sharing ownership instead of keeping it all yourself? Caleb considered. Sometimes. When meetings go long, or when people disagree about directions. But no, not really. This is better than what I had before. How? Before, I was surviving, holding on to land because letting go felt like betraying the dead. Now I'm living, building something that matters beyond me. He looked at her. You taught me that. That legacy isn't about holding on to the past. It's about creating a future worth having. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. When did you become so wise? I married someone smart. Some of it rubbed off. They watched the sun set, painting the sky in shades of fire. Sarah ran up, breathless and dirty, throwing herself at Clara. Mama, Papa, I found a bird's nest. Come see. She dragged them across the ranch, chattering constantly about eggs and baby birds, and whether they could keep one as a pet. Clara and Caleb followed, holding hands, listening to their daughter's excitement. This was the life Clara had built, not the one she'd planned or expected. Better. Real. Hard-won and therefore precious. She'd come to this territory with nothing but desperation and a failed dream. She'd been rejected, suspected, reduced to scrubbing dishes for survival. She'd nearly died multiple times, lost everything, started over from ashes. And from that destruction, she'd built something extraordinary. Not alone, never alone, but with a community of people who'd learned that shared struggle created stronger bonds than individual triumph. The woman who'd stepped off that train a decade ago wouldn't recognize the person Clara had become. Stronger, scarred, capable, loved. That night, after Sarah was asleep, Clara stood in the doorway of their bedroom watching Caleb read by lamplight. He looked up, caught her watching. What? Just thinking about how lucky I am. Lucky? You've been shot at, nearly burned alive, and gave birth in a snowstorm. That's not most people's definition of lucky. No, but I got you, Sarah. This life, all of it because Thomas Mercer was an ass who rejected me. She crossed to him. Best terrible thing that ever happened to me. He pulled her into his lap. You would have been fine without me. Maybe, but I wouldn't have been happy. Not like this. She kissed him. You're stuck with me, Caleb Rourke, for better or worse. Worse seems to involve a lot of arguing. And better? Everything else. They sat together in the lamplight while outside the prairie wind whispered through grass and stars wheeled overhead. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. It always did. The land was harsh, life was hard. Nothing came easy. But they'd built something that mattered, something that would outlast them. A community founded on the radical idea that people were stronger together than apart, that shared success was worth more than individual triumph, that the measure of a life wasn't what you accumulated, but what you built for others. Clara had learned the truth that changed everything. You didn't need permission to matter. You didn't need wealth or status or the right family name. You needed courage to stand when it was easier to fall, stubbornness to keep building when everything burned down, and the wisdom to know you couldn't do it alone. She'd come west as someone's rejected bride. She was leaving, whenever that day came, as someone who'd helped build a legacy. The woman who'd been told she wasn't suitable had created something extraordinary from spite and survival and refusing to accept other people's judgments. And if that wasn't the best revenge, Clara didn't know what was. In the end, that's what mattered. Not the beginning, desperate and humiliating, not even the middle, violent and terrifying, but the ending they'd chosen to write together. A ending that wasn't an ending at all, but the foundation of something that would continue long after they were gone. Children who'd grow up knowing cooperation was stronger than competition. A community that valued people over profit. A piece of harsh prairie transformed by stubborn hope into something worth having. Clara Rourke, née Whitmore, had come to this territory with nothing. She'd leave it having built everything that mattered. And some cold November night years from now, when she was old and Sarah was grown with children of her own, someone would ask her the question. People always asked pioneers. Was it worth it? Clara would look at the life she'd lived, the people she'd loved, the legacy she'd helped create, and she'd answer with absolute certainty every single hard, brutal, beautiful moment of it. Because that was the truth about building anything worth having. It cost everything you had, and it was worth it, always.